I was born and raised in Mexico, and my childhood was mainly with my mother. My parents are divorced. I'm the only child. My mother, I consider her as sort of religious. She would always ask me to pray. I attended Catholic school my whole life. I was in Mexico until I was 16 years old. Basically, my curiosity about God and religion started when I was around 8 or 9 years old. I have a very close cousin of mine. She became a Protestant. That's a different branch of Christianity. And of course, as a child, I was 8 or 9. That's all I knew. I knew nothing about Islam. I just knew about Catholicism, and now my cousin was telling me things about her conversion to Protestant. So she was telling me a lot of things that made me start doubting being a Catholic, I was mainly afraid of going to hell. That was my main concern back then. As a child, I just thought, oh my God, I just want to do the right thing. But she would tell me, not directly, but she would kind of invite me to her beliefs. And at that point, I was sort of nervous, like, what should I do? Should I remain Catholic, or should I be what my cousin is? My mother never knew about this, because I just imagined she would be mad that my cousin was, making me think of other things. But I knew my cousin, she was just doing it from her heart to try to guide me. So around the age 10, I started going more frequently to her temple. And I started reading the Bible more because I wanted to find out the truth. Long story short, in that period of my life, I would just pray to God every night. Every night when I was in bed, I was like, God, I'm very afraid to go to hell. What should I do? Should I stay Catholic, or should I be a Protestant like my cousin? Please guide me. And every night I would ask for guidance, every single night. Years passed. I would go with my cousin to the temple, but I wasn't really feeling what I thought I would feel. Like my heart wasn't really opening to the idea of Jesus being the Son of God. That's actually a concept I never understood throughout my years in Catholic school or being a Catholic. I just never really thought that was, the case. So actually, I kept praying to God, and I wasn't finding an answer. So at one point I said, God, you know what? I'm not going to be a Catholic, and I'm not going to be a Protestant. I'm not going to be anything, but one thing I know for sure is that I do not want to stop believing in you, because I know you exist. I know you have given me so much. I'm just going to have a relationship with you without calling it something, So I just started to talk to God every day. God, this and that. But I would still keep asking him, like, just guide me, guide me to the right path. I don't want to go to hell or, things like that. I grew up, then at the age of 16, my parents asked me, I was still in touch with my dad because he would financially support us, but he would ask me, oh, would you like to go overseas to study English? I was like, no, but then just something clicked on me, and I was like, okay, yeah, like, how about just 6 months? I don't want to go for a whole year, just 6 months. So I was sort of exchange student. I went to Canada when I was 16, and it's just amazing. My prayer was answered after all these years. So ever since I started praying for guidance, since I was around 10, when I went to Canada, my high school, which my mom was very excited that it was a Catholic high school. And I was actually, I'm like, yeah, that's better than not Catholic, because Catholic school is all I knew, right? Because in Mexico. Then when I arrived in Canada, since I was an international student, they gave me the classes. They chose the classes for me. I had no say on what classes to pick. They gave me world religion class. And At that point, I clearly recall, going through the chapters of the book, and when I saw Islam, I just knew right away. I was like, I can't believe there is a religion out there that believes what I believe, that there is one God and that Jesus is not the Son of God. When I started to read the highlights of the book, what it was saying, I just remember dropping my jaw like, I can't believe this is something, because honestly, I had no clue about Islam. In Mexico, you don't see Muslims. At least in my city, there was no Muslims at all. Nobody really talks about it. So anyway, at that point, I just felt like, this is it. Like, I wish I could be that. I mean, back then, I was not really enlightened at all. I didn't even know you could become a Muslim, to be honest. I just thought you're born with your religion. But then, as I started reading about it, the teacher would like give tests after each religion chapter. And surprisingly, in Islam, I got 100%. And then Christianity, I got like 80-something, Buddhism, some other, but like Islam was the only one I got 100%. I became very like, wow, this is just so natural, like this is so natural. So I started reading more about it. I didn't tell anybody because I was sort of afraid to, I don't know, just to express that I had interest in other religion other than mine. So I kept reading about it secretly. Then the 6 months passed. I had to go back to Mexico. So I kept that in my heart. I didn't tell anybody. And I just made the idea that I was gonna go back to Mexico and just continue on with my life. But then something strange happened where my dad was like, why don't you just finish high school? Because this was grade 11 when I went. He's like, why don't you just finish high school in Canada and you come back for university? And that was kind of strange to hear because, I don't know, I just thought, oh, why would he say that? But anyway, so I went back. And to me, that was like, I should read more about Islam. So I was reading about Islam for maybe 8 months or so, until finally I told a girl at my school. My school in Canada was mainly, like white Canadian people or some African American people. You wouldn't really see Muslims either. You saw a few. So I saw this girl, I think she was in a class with me, and I told her, I'm like, you're a Muslim, right? I just wish I could be a Muslim. And she was very fascinated. She was like, why don't you become a Muslim? And I was like, really? Like, can you actually do that? And she said, yes. I'm like, how do you do that? So then she told me, come to the masjid, to the mosque with us, and we can show you more. This was a Sunni masjid. It was actually right across my high school. And I went in. People would talk to me, of course, about the basic beliefs of Islam. I was still kind of afraid to become a Muslim, mainly for what my family would say. So at that point, I was still kind of like refusing to fully embrace it. Then I started having dreams of just holding the Quran or, having the hijab or praying. Prostration is something that I find truly beautiful that I would do without being a Muslim. I just found that beautiful even before I knew about Islam. So a point reached where I couldn't hold my feelings anymore. I said, you know what, it's gonna be a difficult journey. It's gonna be hard to face society, to face my family. But at the end of the day, this is what brings me peace and tranquility, so I'm gonna embrace it. This was just before I graduated high school, so I was 17. I said my shahada, and as soon as I said my shahada, like as I was saying it, just my tears would flow like nonstop. And it just felt like a complete transformation. At that moment, I felt just completely different, just felt so much peace, that peace I haven't really felt before or after. So at that point, everybody was hugging me, congratulating me. I didn't know any other convert to Islam. I didn't really know many Muslims, actually. But I started reading and so on. And then, funny thing is that I had another friend in my high school. She was not practicing at all, but she heard that I became Muslim. So at that point, she gave me the phone number of a lady. She was like, please call this lady. She's going to help you a lot. To be honest, of course, right after I became Muslim, I had no clue about Shia, Sunni, or anything like that. My friend, she gave me a phone number of this lady, and she took me to a Husseiniya, which was actually near my home, and I didn't know. Once I entered the Husseiniya, I was greeted very nice. You know, people make me feel very happy. Very warm environment, and you know, they just told me, oh, sister, you became Muslim, you know, that's amazing. They gave me books about Ahlul Bayt. They actually gave me a very brief story about Ahlul Bayt, and I just automatically felt, again, my heart drawn towards Ahlul Bayt. But again, I just thought, okay, this is just part of Islam. And I was saying, I'm going to read more about it, okay? And then when some of my friends at the Sunni Masjid found out I was going to the Husseiniya, that's where a few problems started happening, which of course I was very oblivious. I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, you know, I mean, I thought just, you know, the place of worship. Some Sunni friends, I consider them friends, they started to giving me hard time when they realized that I was going to the Husseiniya. They started telling me harsh things like, why are you going there? I mean, do you even know what they believe? I mean, they are not Muslims. Very harsh things, you know. And at that point, I just thought, I mean, I cannot really believe what they're saying. I've always liked to research by myself things, you know. So I didn't really appreciate the way they came to talk to me. I was going to college. So then after I finished high school, I went to Mexico. And you know how I mentioned I was just going to stay there to do university. But then I prayed so hard. I was like, God, please, please help me to go back to Canada, because now that I'm a Muslim, I really want to learn more. But of course, at that point, it was more difficult because university is really expensive. I mean, especially as an international student. Then my mom, as me being the only child, she wanted me in Mexico. So it was extremely difficult to convince them. But thank God, he answered my prayer. And after so much difficulty, I was able to go back. And when I was in college, that's when some people from the Sunni Masjid started to question me a lot. They were following me around. And I didn't really appreciate that. I was told once, if you were going to be a Shia, why didn't you just stay Christian? So at that point, I was like, I don't think you should be talking like this, you know. I just did more research. And of course, I'm not saying everybody's like that. That was just my experience. Of course, I had other people from the Sunni Masjid that completely respected my choice. And I continued to enlighten myself with Ahlul Bayt. And it wasn't really a difficult choice. I just found it very natural to be in the path of Ahlul Bayt. Well, the very first time I stepped into Husseiniya, just the environment itself was very pleasing, very calm, tranquil. They introduced me to a couple more convert ladies from that same Husseiniya. And they taught me so much. Like, what I love about Shia Islam basically is that any question I had, it was just an answer for it. In which sometimes I did go to a few seminars, if you can call them, from the Sunni school of thought, and I couldn't really grasp a lot of their concepts. Even though I would ask them a lot of questions, sometimes I would get like, oh, you just have to believe it, you know. Doesn't have to make sense, you just have to believe it. And when I went to Husseini and I would be taught about Ahlul Bayt, just their whole life story, it's just like a divine proof, you know, to me. It was just a proof that Allah, God gave them the tools or the means to inspire all of us to follow their example. So that was basically what drew me more into Shia Islam, and I just found it very logical. I know a lot of people mention this. I had a lot of friends that have converted to Shia Islam mainly because of that it's a very logical path, that it always has an answer to your questions. My family, after I became Muslim, which was in June 2006, I hid it from them for approximately maybe 4 or 5 months. What I wanted to do, my idea was to be very well equipped with knowledge, so when they were to ask me questions, I was prepared. I thought, because my family is like that, they want you to be logical, you know, they want you to know why you're doing something. So I knew that was the way to go with them. Of course, I prayed a lot, was terrified, especially because I thought, oh, okay, so if my family knows that I'm in Canada and I'm gonna be, if I'm a Muslim, they may just cut the support and just send me back to Mexico, right? That was my main fear. Thank God, I prayed so much to make it easy. And it was the easiest thing I could ever imagine. I arrived at the airport, my mom picked me up in Mexico City, and I didn't have hijab, but I had, you know, just like a long shirt, pants. I was covered from my arms. And just something clicked on her. She was like, I think you're Muslim, right? And she knew because I had kind of hinted at her that, you know, Mom, have you ever heard about Islam? You know, like, do you know the Ramadan fasting? And of course, like, she kind of knew because it shows on TV, on the news, you know, when Muslims are fasting and stuff. So she just saw me, and I swear, I didn't have to say anything. She just said, you're Muslim, right? I mean, even, it's strange because even before I was Muslim, I would always just wear pants and t-shirts. I was not wearing anything else, but she just said it. And I was like, at that point, I started like crying. I was like, how do you know? You know? And then she was like, well, just tell me about it. Just tell me you guys believe in Virgin Mary, because that's her main concern. Like Mexican Catholics are very focused on Virgin Mary. And I told her, of course, we have a whole chapter about Virgin Mary, and I had the Quran with me. We sat at the fast food area of the airport, and I started reading to her some of the chapter of Maryam alayhi salam. So I was reading to her what the Quran says about Virgin Mary, and she told me, she said, that's fine, as long as you guys acknowledge Virgin Mary, I'm happy for your choice. I was like, I couldn't believe it, I swear, because my mom, you know, I always thought she was like a difficult person in that sense. In my upbringing, she was always trying to have me very well disciplined. So after that, I told my dad later, like a whole year later, because again, I went back to Canada, so I wasn't really seeing him. I just wanted to tell my mother. As soon as I told my mother, I put my hijab on, because I just wanted to first tell my mom to get her blessing, if you want to call it, you know. And at first she was like, can you not wear that in Mexico, please? And then, of course, she also went through like a whole process of explaining her friends and family why I'm wearing the hijab, things like that. But she's a strong lady. She told me at first it was hard because, of course, you know, Islam has a bad reputation, whatnot. But then my mom became strong in explaining my choice. And actually now she loves it. Like, she even gives me hijabs and like things like that. So my dad, actually, when I told him as well, my prayer was answered. He just hugged me And I started crying too. I'm like, I was just so afraid to tell you. And he's like, no, why would you be afraid? As long as you believe in God and do good, that's what matters. I'm like, okay, thank you. And yeah, they were fine. The rest of my family, very respectful. They're very respectful in our beliefs. Post-conversion, I would say that most of my experience has been beautiful. I've encountered beautiful people that have helped me throughout, especially because they know that my family was back home and I was a student in Canada. Of course, in some instances, I did encounter a few people where they wouldn't really welcome me because I was not from a particular country, or I was, just not really from their country, or I wouldn't speak their language, things like that. But thank God that experience is not, it wasn't really majority of the time. I just encountered a few people that would sometimes put me down, but mainly it was a good experience. Well, basically, when I was learning about the 12 Imams, I read a hadith, and of course, the selection of the successor of the Prophet. That's what truly made it very clear to me, because it's only logical that the successor of the Prophet is chosen divinely. I don't understand how the successor of the greatest message of humanity, Islam, I just think God would do anything to protect the message of the Prophet. So that's why its successor had to be divinely appointed. So that was the main key for me that stood out. And of course, how the knowledge has to be protected by his Holy Family, because otherwise, we're humans. If you're not infallible, then what's the assurance for us that we are following the right path? So that's mainly what stood to me.